And a pleasant good afternoon, and welcome to the Amphitheater. And welcome to the Guest Artist Series. Today's guest artist, Christa Westbrook. Let's have a round of applause, a little bit of love for Christa. Christa's down front with the blue shirt on. And she is going to be ably assisted by a whole host of Super Soul friends today. We have Darren, who will be in the baseball cap. We also have Michael Beam. Aaron at the furnace. Gio is here. And Kat Burns along with us. In addition, we have Amanda, who will be answering all of your questions. If you type in on the live stream today, we are being broadcast live. So if you have questions about the process or any of the steps or anything about Christa's history, by all means, just type them in. Amanda will do her very best to answer them. She is an absolute exceptional source of information for us here. And Amanda does answer always, all the questions of the live stream. So lots of great history. Upstairs in the booth, we have Matt. And today I am assisted in narration by Catherine Ayers. And of course, my name is Stephen. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. Great, I'm understanding that I need to increase the volume just a bit. Thank you. All right, so we are already underway in the process today. Christa's going to be making a stuffed cup combination work today. She will then inflate that with multiple gathers over the top of that stuffed cup. So she's working on a bubble right now. She's already taken her first gather out of the furnace. She's inflating that. She will, of course, apply some color over the top of that. And then from there, on the left-hand side of the stage, you'll see a box, a black box in the back corner, just beyond where Michael is standing. And inside that box is a cup that's already been pre-made. And as she inflates this bubble, she'll then come over, lift off the top of that, drop the bubble inside, collect it, bring it back over, inflate it again. And then from that point, she will add some pinwheels onto the exterior in a process, an application process. After that point, she'll enlarge the vessel, extend it, do a transfer, and then finally at the very end of the process, cut it, break it free, pop it into the annealer. So quite a lot is going to be happening today as we go forward. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the hot shop, we'll just walk you through some of the general areas and the equipment that we'll be using today. In the center of the room, Aaron, if you could raise your hand. Maybe, the other thing is, I don't think they can always hear us, so maybe I'll just direct you. This is our central furnace, where our molten glass is going to be living, currently at about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. It's about 1,260 degrees Celsius. At that consistency, at that temperature, glass will be about the consistency of honey. On either side, you have the reheating chambers. And this is where that temperature is, also 2,300 degrees. So Christa's diving in, and she's gathering the glass here. Essentially, the rod she's using is hollow. It's a blowpipe. It's a steel rod. And by dipping the rod into the surface of the glass and then rolling in a consistent manner, she's able to collect glass and spin it onto the rod. Now, the type of equipment that she's using here is a cooler, because glass is not a great transmitter of heat, so these irons do get very, very hot. And in order to continue to handle them, we have to occasionally cool them down. This is simply a pump with water, which allows the iron to become cooler and allows her to manipulate it. The object that you see Christa using here to shape the glass is one of the more delicate pieces of equipment in the hot shop. This is actually newspaper that's been folded and then soaked with water. And that newspaper, once it's soaked with water, and applied to the bottom of the glass, creates a small level area of steam and she can really delicately and gracefully control the surface. Now, this tool that Christa is using, we call these types of tools blocks. And they are made out of hardwood. They're soaked in water. And you can see Christa's dipping it back in the backside. And these are shaping tools. One of the things you'll see today is the alternate inflation method, because of course during COVID we were not able to blow directly into the blowpipes. So we did create a method by which air can be put into the blowpipe safely. This small sleeve fits over the end of the blowpipe, and compressed air is operated through a foot pedal, and you'll see Christa using that multiple times today. It's about 1 to 1.5 pounds of air pressure. Not a lot at all, but certainly enough to provide air into the pipe. If I'm talking too much, then.
No.
So as Christa continues to shape the bubble, I want to tell you a little bit about her history and her artistic process. She was born in 1987 in Fort Worth, Texas, in the month of June. So we like to say that Christa was born for the heat. She first discovered glass at age 16 in high school in Liberal, Kansas. And Christa comes from an artistic home. Her mother is a high school art teacher. So creation has been a part of her history for a long time. In fact, today's patterns that Christa's making the shape comes from a very long history of women working in creative ways in her family. Christa's of the Choctaw tribe of Oklahoma, First Nations tribe. And it was through this interaction with her great-grandmother at first, Velma Thursey Holcomb Wages, her full name, that Christa started to understand patterning and accumulation as creative techniques. And you see that. These are quilts that Christa's grandmother and great-grandmother and mother have created. And it's through this process of taking pieces in a social environment, many people working together, and adding pieces together, that Christa has developed her pinwheel shape. And I'll speak more about that in a moment. So the interesting thing about the quilts here, all of the material comes from clothing that her family members would wear. And at the end of the useful life of the clothing, they would cut the clothing up and stitch it together to make quilts. The one that I'm most fascinated with is this one, because this one is made out of denim and khaki material. In essence, it's all pants, right? And Christa's explained that her grandmother, her great-grandmother, created this tradition that they would take the clothing and they would make a quilt for each individual member of the family, right? So this would be her grandfather's. It's through this process of taking small pieces and working collaboratively with the other women in her family that Christa developed the use and idea for these pinwheels. And these are the pieces that will be applied. You can see the large image at the far left side of the stage. That is going to be the end result, the end of today's piece. This is one we made in practice earlier in the week. But these pinwheels are made from a series of small cane. Right? So the cane that Christa is using is called veiled cane. And what she does is she takes a clear gather of glass, puts a color over the top of that, and then stretches that gather out over several feet, 10, 15, maybe 20 feet at a time. Once it cools, she'll cut it to make these pieces. She'll then arrange them on a plate. She'll collect them into a cylinder, pinches one end of the cylinder, opens it up, and creates a pinwheel. So she'll do this multiple times, put them in the annealer and let them cool down. Once they're cool, she takes the one that she likes, the different sizes that she likes. They'll be reheated, and then they'll be attached to the vessel. And we'll see that process as we go along today. So in essence, what she's doing is she's taking the history and the heritage that she's learned from her grandmothers and her great-grandmothers and adapting it to glass and advancing her whole history and lineage, but in a different method, in a different medium. So one of the important roles that you will see today as part of the team, Michael is utilizing this very large black paddle. And that paddle is actually wood, but it has been charred over time. And Michael's job here is to shield the heat from Christa and from the glass. So as the glass comes out, it's radiating a large amount of heat. And in order to continue to manipulate it, you'll see Christa has that silver sleeve. And she'll use other protective devices today.
Right now, they're just talking about how big this piece is going to be. Everybody wants to know how many gathers is she going to take. So Stephen is checking in with Christa to scope out the deal. What's going on?
I have the scoop.
You got the scoop.
So right now we're at 4 gathers. So we gather every time we go into the furnace, we put another layer of glass on top. That's considered a gather. There are 4. The next step in the process is we're going to go over to the box there in the corner and grab the originally made cup. It's called a stuffed cup, and you watch them literally stuff the bubble into the cup, right? And then they'll gather one more time over that, so that'll be 5 gathers. Any questions in the audience at this point? If you do. Oh, sure. So the question is, on the pipe cooler here, someone was using and activating the foot pedal. And so the question is, what was that for? And that's essentially a mechanical pump that pumps the water up and allows it to flow into this tray so that it can have a recirculation of water so it doesn't get too hot. Great question. Any other questions? Yes. How big is it going to get? Well, here's the practice. And of course, Christa's from Texas, right? So that's where that saying, go big or go home, right? And P.S., on the board over there, you see her Insta handle, @Glamazon. It's going to get big. I don't know the exact dimensions, but I think the goal is to make it larger than this. That's pretty big. Yeah, it could be that. Well, that's really that's quite huge. It's half of Geo.
All right, Stephen, it looks like things are good happening over here.
All right.
they're going to stuff this cup. So they're going to stuff that clear bubble down into a big color cup in the bottom of that oven. So you can see Krista's ready at the top of the stairs. Darren's going to bring over this bubble so hot that it's actually going to drip and stretch down into the cup and stuff it. This is a nice way to get color on a nice big bubble. So you can see everyone's in their position. Everyone's, if they're not doing something, if they're not actively in the process, they're out of the way because things happen pretty quickly once you get the glass hot and gooey like this. So Darren's going to be focused on getting that glass hot and moving to those stairs. If anyone's behind him, they're in big trouble. So we want to make sure there's a clear path. Everybody's out of the way. Krista's ready to grab the pipe and steadily drop that bubble right down into the cup. Here we go. See how it just drips down in there really nicely? She'll cap the pipe, which traps the air inside, and out comes the cup. Yeah, how about a big round of applause? I'll give you just a little bit of information. That glass is very sticky, and she's dropping this bubble down into the cup. If she touches the side, she'll stick. So it's a process that you need a lot of concentration, a very steady hand to get into that cup without sticking to the side of the walls. And she did an excellent job. What do you think, Stephen?
Mark of a true master, for sure. Yes. The question is, was the cup hot? Yes. In order for glass to stick to itself or stick to another item, it's always a good idea that the glass, both pieces are very, very hot. And we'll see that a little bit more when we attach the pinwheels. But yes, in order to make sure that it does adhere, otherwise we'd get what's called a cold seal, where one is hot and one is cold. So yeah, very hot. You can see here Darren is working through a process called marvering. And this is rolling the glass back and forth to ensure that the interior of that cup connects solidly with the bubble. Back into the reheating chamber it goes. The glass that we're using today is a good type of glass called soda lime glass. And like all glass, once heated, and once it does come out of the reheating chamber, the clock starts ticking. The interior of that glass is extremely hot, several thousand degrees in heat. And the moment that it comes out, it's going to start interacting with the ambient temperature of the room, which is about 73, 76. So that temperature differentiation is very, very huge. Also, as part of the shaping process, we use the steel tabletop in the process called marvering to shape the glass, but it also cools it significantly. And you can see that in temperature changes. When it comes out of the reheating chamber, bright, bright, bright orange, almost yellow in color. But as it cools, glass gets darker. And so you can see those temperature changes as we go through the entire process, where things are hot, where things are cool. The reason I say we're at a race with time here, or the time is ticking, is that we're trying to avoid a consideration or an area called thermal shock. And that's where glass is cold on the outside, but still hot on the inside. And that tension in between will cause it to crack. which of course would be disastrous. Now, sometimes we'll use thermal shock to our advantage, and you'll see that when we crack the piece off and move it or transfer it. And there's ways we can control that. But for the most part, we definitely want to try to avoid it. A shout out from a woman named Shelly. So hi, Shelly. Shelly is Christa's mom, who's been watching along. Hi, Mama. So you may be wondering what and why, if we go back and forth into that reheating chamber, why would we need this giant torch? Yeah, it's a bit hard to hear over that torch. If you notice where Christa is directing that heat, she's directing it at the end of the blowpipe, right? But not necessarily on the hot molten sphere, the cup area. And the reason she's doing that is, as you notice, as Darren puts the piece in and out of the reheating chamber, the majority of that end there, which we call the moil, is not in the furnace, right? So it's getting cold. That torch is designed to add heat to stabilize it so it doesn't become too cold, doesn't suffer thermal shock or crack off. Question, yes? What are those squares on the bottom? I'm not sure. Can you... Oh, here. Are you talking about these pieces right here?
Talking about our AC vents.
These are the ones, correct? Yeah, this is one of the greatest parts about working in this environment. Rarely, in most hot shop experiences, do you have an air conditioning system, right? Because we have 2,300 degrees heat. But in this hot shop, we have air conditioning vents that can be popped up and down to cool the artists while they're working here. So it's an amazing, amazing feature. And they can be popped up in any one of the locations here. So depending on where folks are working in the space. So again, additional shaping happening here.
So right now, Darren is using this metal table called a marver to shape and cool the glass. It's actually very difficult to keep something round on a flat table. But you can see he's got lots of skill, never stops turning. When you make big glass like this, it's always important to have a big team. So you can see there's lots of people. Christa's the gaffer. She's the person in charge, and so everyone else is just here to help out. But we've got Aaron running the doors, backup for lifting, torching. And so usually the bigger the glass, the bigger the team. When we talk about glass, sometimes we talk about the 3 T's of glassmaking. Timing, temperature, and teamwork, I think, is probably our favorite T. Temperature and timing, of course, very important. So is your team. So we had a question about that newspaper, I think, online. Christa was just shaping the glass right in the palm of her hand using newspaper. So this big ball of glass that's over 2,000 degrees, she was just shaping with the local newspaper right in the palm of her hand. And I believe she brought in her own newspaper, and it's a lot thicker than the one we usually use for our normal demonstrations because we usually make smaller pieces. And so our newspaper pad is probably the thickness of 2 pot holders. She brought in one that's the thickness of about 3 or 4 pot holders. So the bigger the glass, the bigger the newspaper, because you want that extra bit of protection. She's also got a couple graphite fiber pads there on the bench as well. They've pulled out a big block. In these buckets of water behind the bench, we have all these wooden blocks. I think Stephen talked about these earlier, these cherry wood blocks. And you can see, the bigger the glass, the bigger the team. The bigger the glass, the bigger the block as well. All the tools, everything gets bigger once you start making bigger glass. And so Kat's got the big block, and it's a pretty heavy block. It's a big block of wood, and so this one does not have a handle. This is a block they're going to use on the bench. So they're just going to set it down. And everything that's happening right now is leading me to believe that they're going in for another gather. So Gio's come over here to this pipe cooler. Also, when you have more glass on the end of the pipe, it's important that you can get a good grip and you can hold the pipe. You can really choke up on the pipe and hold the pipe real close to that hot glass. And so cooling the pipe, they'll probably cool it before and after they gather. Because when they go in to gather, the pipe's going to get hot again. And so they're just going to cool this off now. And then probably again after. I'm a little worried about your quilts here, Christa. We might have to shield the quilts from the hot glass. You'll see when they go in, they're going to gather quite a bit more glass. I'm going to move this just for a second so everybody can see.
An additional consideration, and you can see this when they lift it, is the amount of weight that bubble and cup currently consist of. You're probably right now at about 25 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you were to think about that, that's a 6 foot iron, maybe 5 foot iron. Keeping that amount of weight out and away from you requires a great deal of core strength as well as muscular strength.
All right, here we go. Remember that stuff cup? Now they're stuffing the furnace. They got to get out of this furnace without touching the side walls. Darren is a very skilled glassmaker. He'll get out of there nice and easy, but you can see, or we're limited to the size gathers we can make by the size of that door. Beautiful! Right to the pipe cooler. Cools that pipe right off. Because like we said, we want to choke up on that pipe. You don't want to hold it way back here with that amount of weight on the end of the pipe. Gio's even holding down the pipe cooler because this glass is so heavy. It kind of is shaking around our little pipe cooler. They wipe it off because that is the water. They want to be able to turn the pipe. They need that grip, that dexterity of their hands. That's why we don't wear gloves. It would be very hard to turn these pipes with gloves on. So it's just as easy to cool off the pipe, cool off the metal, than to slip on a slippery pair of gloves. Chris is shaping with the newspaper. Kat is shielding her arm from the heat. She's leaning way over that big mass of glass, and I can tell you, that is hot. It's hot on your face, hot on your arm. So sometimes it's nice when your assistant, she's got that silver sleeve on, but sometimes it's nice to have that added bit of heat protection with those two boards. Question? That's a good question. This glass, when it's hot like this, when it's really hot like this, you can brush, your hand's gonna slip right off it because of the moisture in your skin. So at this temperature, if you accidentally brushed your hand up against this, it would just slip right off. And I know this because I accidentally did it once. And it felt like running my hand through hot butter. It just slips right off. The moisture in your hand, just like that newspaper pad, creates that barrier of steam, so your hand really never touches the glass. It's when the glass starts to become cooler and thinner, if little chips pop off, that's when they want to stick to your glass or stick to your arm. So at some point it becomes kind of sticky, and it will burn you. We don't usually get burned on the glass, but usually on the metal pipes. You can see we got lots of protective gear. Yeah, so hopefully there's enough moisture in your skin that it just slips right off. But it's usually the metal tools that get us. I think you could ask every glass maker on the team. Occasionally we get burned by the glass, but it's usually those metal tools that get you.
And so at this point, Christa has had the team attach the blow hose. You can see that just on the other side of Darren. And if you look down, you might be able to see her right foot is tapping a small pedal. And this is allowing the air to go into the blowpipe and inflate the bubble. Also, one of the critical and most important parts about the process is that it must keep turning at all times to keep the bubble on center. If they stop turning at any point, that bubble will start, under the weight of gravity and the pull of gravity, the force of gravity, will start to pull towards the ground. Now, sometimes they'll use this to elongate the sphere and the shape. Most of the time, it does need to be turning always. It's an ancient catchphrase, rolling makes it round. As long as the pipe is rolling on the rails of the bench or turning in their hands, it will stay on center. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. So at this point, Christa is using a tool called jacks. She's putting a constriction in the neck of the object here. And by squeezing those blades down, that connection, that constriction will be forced into the hot mold glass.
So they're using gravity. Gravity is one of our favorite tools. We're constantly fighting gravity. But sometimes we use it as our tool. And so by holding it at that angle like that, they can get the glass to stretch and elongate.
Now you may, in the audience, hear this hissing sound, and that is the compressed air. But we're not heating or cooling the glass. At this point, Michael is using that compressed air to blow the heat away from Christa's face and upper body so that she can continue to work in a safe manner. Yes, question down front. Okay, so the question is the piece hollow right now, and what is the wall thickness at this point on the interior? So yes, indeed the piece is hollow, yes, because we are continuing to inflate it. That wall thickness will change. When we pull the stuffed cup out, you saw that the cup itself is about 1.5 to 2 inches wall thickness here. With 3 or 4 gathers underneath that, you're probably at 3.5 inches. But as we add air, as Christa directs the team to add air, that thickness of the wall will thin out as the vessel gets larger and larger, as you can see here. So clearly a delicate balance of heat and cooling you can see happening here. Christa heating the end of the pipe to ensure that it doesn't crack, while Gio and Catherine are cooling the center of the pipe so they can maintain hand contact and keep it turning. And then Darren is placing it back on this cart that appears to be on rails. We call this a yoke, and it allows them to move the heavier pieces in and out with ease and maintain a certain level of consistent elevation inside of the reheating chamber. So a considerable change in the color of the glass. It's a bit darker, meaning it's cooling. It no longer has that bright orange appearance as if it came right out of the reheating chamber. Darren taking his time to slowly make sure it's centered on the pipe. So by slowly rolling back and forth on the rails of the bench, you ensure that the piece is completely on center. So at this point, Christa has grabbed a small torch. This looks like a Red Max to me. This torch is a little bit different than the other torch that you see. You can clearly see that the flame, bright blue consistency. And this torch is producing a flame of about 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It is the hottest item that we have here. What she's doing is she's starting to warm up areas, specific spots where she will bring one of the pinwheels over and attach it. Now over here on the right-hand side, Michael and Chris have placed one of those pinwheels into a warming area. So it is developing its saturation of heat. They'll bring it over on one of these small paddles. They'll pick it up and attach it to the piece. We have to make sure that the glass in both areas is hot so that it sticks together. It'll tack together rapidly. So Michael has one of the pinwheels on one of the pallets. He's going to go put it into one of our reheating chambers, bring it up to temperature. Once it is at temperature, bring it over to the piece, and you'll see the transfer happen. While this is happening, we have to make sure that the stuffed cup vessel stays consistently warm, and it has to be spot heated. So quite a bit of rubbing the belly, tapping the head thought process going on here. So Christa has given the indication to Michael to bring the pinwheel over. Grab it here, heat a spot, heat the pinwheel, and place it on. Now, it will be a flat disc right now. You'll see a very almost disconnected amount here. It looks just like it's been placed on. And now by putting it back into the reheating chamber, the glass is going to start to melt together, becoming one solid piece. As that pinwheel is pressed into the glass, the vessel will start to absorb it, and they will merge together. So Chris is going to help that process along using a wooden paddle, just to press it in. So Amanda had a question about how the pinwheels have been made, and we did talk about that, but I can do a quick refresher in between the high action here that's happening. The pinwheels are made by creating cane. And cane is simply a collection of clear glass, color applied over the top of it to a very large mound. Another puntile is attached, and then it's stretched over 10, maybe 12, almost up to 15 feet. Once that happens and it spins out, these small canes are cut from the very long one. I'm going to pause that process as we watch. Again, here Christa's spotlighting or spot heating the area that the next piece will come into. Once the canes are all cut in a uniform shape, they're laid on a kiln shelf here. They're put into a reheating chamber. They're fused together. She'll come along with a punty and roll them up so that they make a cylinder. And then from there, she pinches it closed, pulls it out, and flips it over to open them like the foot. She'll cut each one of them off individually and repeat that process, constricting them, opening them, and then cutting them free. All right. So Michael bringing the other pinwheel over to be heated, bringing it up to that temperature. You can see how the first one is now starting to curve with the vessel, the exterior shape of the vessel. Okay, Christa giving the instruction that once it comes out of their heating chamber, then Michael is to bring over the next piece. The coordination of the team is super important at this stage. They're looking at different temperatures. They're looking at different timing. Krista's given the indication she's ready to come over. Michael quickly bringing the pinwheel. Krista has it in her hand. She's heating both the surface of the vessel and the pinwheel itself. And checking that alignment. And directing Darren to give it another flash. A flash means taking it back into the reheating chamber. Okay. Another major milestone accomplished at this point of the process. And you can see how the vessel is moving under the weight of gravity here. As it stays stationary for 1 or 2 seconds, the weight is pulling over. And it's Darren's job to make sure that he gives the indication when it needs to turn, rotate, and maintain its centered appearance.
Do we have brakes on? Where are the brakes? Is that one on? No. All right, you push, I'll pull.
So going through a process right now of evening out the temperature in the entirety of the piece. It's gone through a little bit of a brutal experience here. Spot heated in some areas at 4,000 degrees. Other areas were cooler than that. Put back into the reheating chamber, taken out of the reheating chamber. Stuff attached to it, heated, punched, paddled. So we're just allowing it to take a little bit of a rest, if you will. And by rest, what we're also doing is ensuring that even temperature, even heat is being applied throughout the entirety of the piece. You can see the temperature changes in the pinwheels. They're growing a little bit brighter. And so Krista is now using these paddles to shape the glass, and we're also using gravity at the same time. These paddles are made out of cork, and they are dry paddles. And by pressing them against the side, she's going to be able to reshape the object. And so in this process, she's taking it from almost spherical, now depressing it into an oval shape, similar to the piece here. So flattening the sides. You can see she's moved the foot pedal, and if you watch, she will, as she's pressing with the cork paddle, she's going to start inflating as well. She doesn't want to condense it too much. She does want to make sure that it is compressed, but also that it has the ability to inflate, so she can push that air against the paddles to ensure that they become straight. So Darren utilizing gravity here as he hangs the piece over the rail. Gravity is pulling it and elongating the shape. And now from here, Krista applying those cork paddles. Here again, gravity always working on the piece, so it is dripping or falling off center. And if you take a look at Krista's right foot, you'll see her occasionally tapping down on that black foot pedal. That provides the inflation.
So a question we get asked a lot is, why are you using those torches? And we use those torches to preheat the glass out here in the room temperature air. That way when we go back in, that area that they preheated is nice and hot, and other areas we're able to kind of cool off and settle up. Fused silica?
So I was just saying to Catherine that I don't think I've seen a piece that actually almost takes up the entirety of the reheating chamber. And Catherine, can you share with our audience both here and at home how it is that we are able to put a camera inside the reheating chambers?
Yeah, our camera is right behind a little window of fused silica. And actually, when she goes in the oven, you can see the reflection of the window on the piece. So next time she goes in the oven, you'll see a little square, a little black square. And that's the little window. So there's a little tiny window. We have a piece of it right here, Stephen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So this is that fused silica. It's about, what, three-quarters of an inch thick. It's pure silica. It was a type of glass developed right here in Corning in the 1930s. Nothing else added to it. It's just pure silica. Stephen, did you talk earlier about our soda lime glass?
Did I talk? I'm sorry?
About our soda lime glass?
I did.
Yeah, so Stephen was talking about how we add soda ash and limestone. That soda ash reduces the silica's melting temperature. So without that flux, that fused silica has a high melting temperature of over 3,000 degrees. So it was used in the space shuttle's windshield. And even today, see that little square box? So that's the reflection of that window in the back of the oven. If you look through the hole, you can actually see the little window, and there's just an ordinary camera right behind it. We do put a fan on it just to keep it cool, but that's that special glass called fused silica.
I know.
Nice.
So great.
And actually, our live stream is running through that fused silica right now.
Is it?
It's one of the 2 high purity glasses that make up the core of optical fibers. So fused silica, we're all connected by glass, and especially now in this live stream, you're getting this video live through that fused silica.
So you can see now that gravity is really being utilized a great deal. As Darren increases the angle, gravity is pulling the mass of the wick and elongating the vessel quite a bit. Again, evening out the heat, making the areas a little bit more warm as it goes back in, as Catherine earlier mentioned. That'll help it stretch a little easier as they bring it out.
This is probably an advantage to this automated inflation system. They've pulled the pedal out so Christa can tap on the pedal when she wants. Otherwise, somebody would have to put their mouth on the end of that pipe that's going up and down and back and forth and blow through the end of the pipe. But with this blow hose and automated inflation system, Christa can just tap on that pedal anytime she needs a little air, so it takes, you don't have that relay of blow, and then the assistant blows, and she'd have to say stop blowing, and sometimes when you have those torches going, you don't hear it. So it's kind of nice with this automated inflation system. She can just tap on the pedal and get the air in there that she needs. She's really taking a hands-on approach here. She just wiped glass with her hands. She's brave. She's a brave gal. This is hand-blown glass. Actually, she's blowing glass with her foot as well, so can't call it hand-blown glass anymore.
So the next step in our process here is going to be a transfer. So they're going to take this vessel, which is on one blowpipe, and we'll attach a second one. So we'll instruct the team to attach a second one to the bottom. But we want the ability to inflate this. So what Christa is doing now is she's finding the center point of the bottom. And she's marking that. Little piece of chalk. And by turning it, she's been able to define exactly where the next blowpipe will be. But in order to make sure, the bottom right now is currently solid. In order to make sure that she can get air into that, I'm just going to use a bit of an unconventional method. She's actually going to take a drill and drill into the bottom to provide a port for air. We'll develop a secondary blowpipe and attach it to it, and then crack the first one off. Pretty critical phase in the process. So to do this, in order for glass to move, it has to be hot. Hot glass will move, cold glass will not. So she's spot heating an area. As she's doing that, in goes the drill. She's enlarging that hole just a bit to ensure that it doesn't close. And a quick spot examination.
So, Steven, she just drilled a small hole in the bottom of this piece? She just drilled a small hole in the bottom of this piece?
Yeah.
And so what we'll see in our next steps is that there will be a secondary blowpipe. They'll gather glass over the top of it and then blow a small hole through the end so it becomes a collar of glass. Right? They'll do this a couple of times. They'll make they'll take a gather, shape it on the marver, and from that point they'll literally heat the end and blow it out. So now we have a cylinder. That cylinder will be brought over to the area that was where the hole was drilled and attached. Then they'll crack off the first one that Darren's been using.
I'm going to give you a lift, Michael.
As we're evening out the temperature here, Michael and Gio, if you take a look at over on the right side of the stage where Darren is working, he's creating that collar on the secondary blowpipe. You see him shaping that with his jacks. Kat's going to come in and take a look as well for an assist. Darren using the back handle of the jacks to flatten and smooth and shape. And now using the tips of the jacks to ensure that the hole to the blowpipe is even and centered. It's going to cool that handle just a bit. And then he'll keep it warm, waiting for the exact time that Christa instructs for it to be brought over and attached. Darren's going in to take another gather over the top. So the first one is set, the first collar. Reshape here on the marver. That connection point does have to be quite strong, so a larger collar certainly necessary for a piece as large as the one they've created. If you take a look over here, he's going to attach that tube, and you'll see him blow out the end. A small bubble will come out and pop. There it is. He'll crack that off. So that has, again, opened that collar, that column of glass, so that air will go through. This procedure is critical towards the end of the process. When Christa will transfer it over, she wants the tip of the object to be very thin. I had a very thin neckline at the end. So in order to do that, she'll have to heat it, stretch it, but also inflate it. And in order to inflate it at that point, if she did it now, it would become so thin that the piece would fall. Gravity would take it right off. There's so much weight in the bottom of that vessel. Right? But if we put a connection on the bottom of it, we can heat the top and allow it to stretch out, become thinner, and then articulate it. So this is the step in the process where we are right now. Okay. Darren at the ready. Christa's going to guide that in, that blowpipe in, centering it. Now this is going to be the area where we're going to use thermal shock to our advantage. And that's going to come on the blowpipe that's on the left, where you see Gio applying the heat. He's going to apply a considerable amount of heat. And then there'll be most likely jacks, which are metal, which will cool it and constrict it, but also there may be a small amount of water that will induce thermal shock. Then one tap, maybe two taps, and the piece should come free. Got it?
Okay, the application of water. All right. There's been a collective exhale on the stage at this point.
Wowza.
All right, and so now the top end of that vessel is open. Bottom end is connected to the blowpipe. We'll see Christa start to stretch that area out. The wall thickness at the top is still quite thick. And so she'll elongate that form. And then she'll use some tweezers to pull and shape the glass to thin it even more. And you can see Darren is heating the overall vessel to ensure that temperature is pretty even now. He's going to leave just the tip of it in the reheating chamber. And this is going to concentrate the heat of the reheating chamber just on the upper third of the vessel, the most pointed part, which is where they want the glass to move the most. That process is going to be assisted as they take it out. But you can see him moving in and out of the reheating chamber to ensure that the correct heat is placed in the correct area so they can manipulate. And so here too, we can see the difference in color, which is also an indication of where the glass will move freely. So we're just gonna constrict that hole just a bit using the newspaper, tapering it down. So here too, a vessel this size, we want to ensure that there's consistent heat at all times. So you'll see Gio is bringing it in for a couple rotations, ensuring that the entirety of the vessel stays neutrally warm. I'll bring it back out to heat just the lip, again to manipulate and shape it. And before he brings it out the last time, he'll go in for one final bath of heat to ensure everything is consistent and avoiding thermal shock. See Gio gently setting that massive piece of glass down. She's doing so to avoid any type of vibration that could come from rapidly setting it down. And here again, Christa using the newspaper and that small little area of steam to shape very, very precisely and taper that into a teardrop shape. A little bit of compressed air to cool the area. And now the application of heat prior to going back into the furnace to ensure that that area will become even more fluid and even hotter. Okay, so even more evening out of heat in a vessel this size, that's going to be critical. You can see here that concentration just at the edge. One more quick bath. All right, so Christa has given the all clear to take it out. She's going to do a little bit more reshaping. Ah, yeah. So a little bit of reconstructive surgery. And Christa is now using those tweezers that we talked about to shape and pull and stretch the glass. She's thinning out the top pointed area. So here too, you can see the variation in color indicating the different areas of heat and mobility within the glass at this point. And you can also see those pinwheel shapes are coming more and more into their original darkened color, as we see as that glass cools. Yes. So the question is, will we be able to see this piece if you come back to the museum tomorrow? And a piece this large has to go through a cooling process. So we call that process annealing, where we gradually, over time, take it from its several thousand degree temperature to bring it down to about a room temperature where it's safe to remove it from the kiln. A piece this large, 24, maybe 36 hours in the annealer, only because of its size and the thickness, to safely bring it to a point where it's ready. Now, smaller pieces that you see here, overnight, maybe 12 hours. The smaller the piece, the less time to anneal. The larger the piece, or the thicker the piece. If it was a solid piece, certainly it would be even longer than that. We did this piece on Monday, I believe it was. Yes, as a practice at 10 in the morning. So we're here Thursday, and
And for those
don't
of you
know.
who won't be here tomorrow, this live stream will be on our museum's YouTube channel. And at the beginning or the end, they usually put a picture of the finished piece. Also, you can see Amanda. She's been running around kind of taking pictures. If you follow us on any of our social media sites, you'll see some of these shots. And then probably they'll post a picture of the... Will you post a picture of the final piece?
Video of like a little bit of the whole process and
Okay. Yeah, so...
a video of the entire process, and then the final piece will be shown. So the question from the gallery atop was, do we need any more assistance? And I'm looking around the room and I'm just noticing that we have quite a representation of different states within the country. Darren is from Buffalo, New York. Kat and Chris Gio from New Jersey. Aaron and Michael from Nebraska. And of course, Christa from Texas and Oklahoma. Okay. So additional shaping, she's tapering now using those jacks to squeeze and hold, pinch that area at the very, very front. And then she'll come back with a pair of scissors and cut off or use water, perhaps, to crack off that unsightly area, that collar at the end, which looks like it's a bit fringed. So we're speaking about the process of cooling the glass. That process again called annealing. Our annealers are set standardly at about 900, 950 degrees. And so part of the process that we're doing now is to bring the glass down to a temperature that's within that 900 degree range. This will take several minutes to do so. Then once it's in the annealer, it'll stay for quite a long time before it is safe to bring it out. That annealing process is governed by time and temperature. So it'll sit at 900, 950, then drop 200 degrees at a time, if that is the program schedule. It'll stay there for several hours. After that period, it'll drop another 200 degrees, and that process will continue. Again, for smaller works, that process is about the same. For larger works, it'll be elongated and stretched over time.
All right, we're pretty close to finishing this piece up. They're just slowly cinching down that hole. You can't close it all up at once because it will kind of start to fold. So you kind of have to slowly shrink that down. And then they're going to cut this right off. And that's why they popped that hole. That's why Christa popped that hole in the bottom. That way when they close it off, it's not closed off completely because the air would expand as every time they got it hot. And so that little hole just allows us to let the air escape. But we're getting pretty close to finishing this up. You can see she's got it nice and closed off. They're just going to clean up that top shape. You can see the shape that she has here is this really beautiful egg shape. And so they're probably just going to clean that up a little bit, point it up a little bit. And like I said, check this out on our YouTube channel. You can watch the whole thing all over again. You can watch guest artist videos. Every one we've ever made here in the amphitheater, which is a lot. And
Also,
you'll be
you
able
can-
to see that final piece.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out you can follow Christa on Instagram at Glamazon Glass.
Yeah. Follow Christa. We're actually, you can see we got all the glassmakers being one of the largest glass museums. We have many facilities here at the museum. So right here, right now you're in the museum side in the amphitheater. But a lot of the artists you're seeing here today work out of the studio of the Corning Museum of Glass, and that's right across the parking lot. And so sometimes we feature our hot glass programs gaffers, but then we also like to invite the studio to come over and demonstrate. The studio does live stream demonstrations in the summer time, right, Stephen?
That's correct.
But not so much throughout the year as much.
You're correct, Catherine. Live streams at the studio happen during the winter during our intensive class series, where we offer classes to the general public from around the world. Also in our summer series, so they're generally Wednesdays at 11:30 in the morning. Take about an hour. You can tune in this winter.
Yeah, so looking around, most of the glassmakers here on the floor teach classes at the studio. I know most of them rent time at the studio. So Christa teaches classes, I believe, furnace and torch working.
Yes, Christa also teaches a jewelry making class at the torch. It's flame working, where she vaporizes metals onto the surface of glass to create lustrous effects. But I think you're right. Almost everyone, in fact, everyone on the stage is either a teacher or a teaching
PA.
assistant.
Yeah.
All right, some final shaping of that tip.
You can see throughout the whole process, gravity is really important. They're stretching this out, elongating it even now. She taps on that foot pedal, inflating the glass a little bit. And then really gets in there with that newspaper to shape the sides.
So Christa directing the team for another reheat. About halfway up the piece. She believes that it does need to be reshaped a bit. So we're going to go back in, even that out. Again, using the cork paddles to compress. And you can see that the alternate inflation tubing has been attached to the end of the blowpipe so that airflow will happen. The foot pedal's down by her right feet. Right foot, I should say.
You can see that shape has taken on a nice round shape, and the shape Chris is looking for is that flattened egg shape. So they're going to use those corks again. Cork is a really nice tool because if you use any other tool, you risk scratching the glass. So by getting in there with those corks, she can rub the glass and not risk scratching the glass. If you used wood, if you used metal, it would scratch the glass and it wouldn't be as clean. So by getting in there with the cork, you can really shape that right up and squeeze it and press it, and it just kind of slips off the glass. It has a very distinct smell. Some of you might be able to smell it. I know with the masks on, we can't smell it too much, which is fine by me because I don't love the smell of burning cork. Either you love it or you hate it. but it's really shaping up. They're going to go for a quick heat. Any questions as we're finishing up? Yeah? Yeah, so how do we know, so how does Krista or Darren know when to take it out of the oven? So Krista knows how much shaping she wants to do. So if she really wants it to stretch and elongate, or she really wants to squeeze it, she knows they need to see a little bit of movement. Now, if they don't want to shape it at all, and they just want to keep it hot so that it doesn't crack and break, they don't want to see any movement. They're just going to go in for a few seconds. So they look for it when they switch directions, they can see if it kind of moves a little bit. So they're looking for a little bit of movement. So she's taking a good look at this, making sure it's the shape she wants. And it looks really close to the drawing. What do you think? Yeah. Another question? 1 second. Wait till they turn that torch off. Say it again. I think it's a different color. Is that right, Krista?
Yep.
What color is it?
This is gold brown.
Gold brown.
Silver in it too.
Nice. So it's a color called gold brown. It's a transparent sort of brown color. So it's going to be a lot darker than this, almost like a darker amber. Yep. I think this is nice. We always talk about this inflation system and how much we dislike it. But I think this is one of the applications where it's nice because Krista can actually get outside the bench and inflate the glass.
And Catherine brings up a very interesting point. For furnace workers, so much of their training has been involved in understanding how to turn, how to heat, and how to blow. Also, in their process, they generally work in teams where one person is at the bench, kneeling down or squatting down, and has their mouth on the blowpipe as it's traveling on the rails back and forth. So when the pandemic came and we were not permitted to blow into pipes and share pipes for obvious health reasons, it became an interesting dilemma. How does this art form, which has been developed since the Romans or even before, how do we continue in a safe manner? And so the alternate inflation technique was developed, but the learning curve was really strenuous and sometimes arduous for folks to get their brains around and their hands around after learning so much and spending so much time developing a technique and a fluidity and an understanding, much like an athlete would. So it was a big shift, both mentally and physically, for our gaffers here. And our flame workers as well. I am a person who operates in the world of flame working, and here too we would normally blow on very thin blowpipes made of glass themselves, but of course we could not do that. So utilizing alternate techniques as well, not to the degree that the furnace workers had to make that Herculean effort and jump and shift.
People ask us all the time, are you going to go back to the way you've done it before? And we said, we will, of course. And then this will be just a nice tool to have in the toolbox.
Sure.
So if it's good for some things. It's not ideal for the glass blowing process. Per se, but it'll be a nice tool to have.
So you can see that Michael is not dressed for Halloween. In fact, he is suiting up with some very multiple layers of protective gear.
which is an indication that the piece is going to be cut free from the blowpipe and put into the annealing ovens. So you see him with a face shield, neck guard. This piece is emanating quite a bit of heat, radiating outwards. And when it is cut free, he will hold it in his hands and walk it to the annealer.
So it looks like they're really close to being finished. They're just keeping that punty warm. Michael has the silver suit, the face shield, the Kevlar gloves on. They're going to clean off any ash that might be on there from the cork paddles. But it's a beautiful shape, beautiful piece. Can't wait to see these colors in the morning.
You might be curious as to why Christa was sweeping the piece at the end. And she's simply removing any bits of cork, any fragments that might have been on the piece. So by using the small whisk broom and rapidly just addressing the surface, she's removing anything that would be stuck on there and then be part of the annealing process. And so in this process, evening out the heat of the entire vessel right now, bringing it down in temperature closer to the annealing temperature of the annealer. Again, that 950 inside the box, the annealing chamber, we want to make sure that we're getting from that several thousand degrees closer so it doesn't go through so much shock. And so by taking it in and out, slowly heating and then cooling, we're lowering the temperature. The team is lowering the temperature of the overall piece. And you can see that by the color change. It's becoming darker. The pinwheels are returning almost to their cold color. You can see that definition of color on the pinwheels as they rotate. Most specifically, the base of the piece quite a bit darker as well. So this is right in line with the process as it should be. Yes, question down front. Sure, so the question is, why doesn't it or will it sag, meaning deflate, when it goes into the annealer? And I'll wait just a moment until the torch is off. Essentially at 900 degrees, the glass is still relatively hot, but it's not hot enough to move at that point. It would have to be upwards of that temperature into the 12, 13, 1400 degree range where it would become malleable or fluid. So at 950 degrees, it's a very calm temperature for the glass. It's rigid, it's stiff. If you were to tap on it, with a tool, of course, you would feel it. So you see Michael warming his hands. Again, we don't want to include any shock with those gloves. He's putting heat on the center of the jacket as well to ensure that that would not cause stress or thermal shock to the piece. It's going to be right underneath there prepping. Oftentimes glass moves when it wants to, not when we want it to, so he's prepared. Right. And into the box it goes. All right, so give it up for Christa Westbrook and the team, by all means. Bravo. Yes, again. Much thanks to Darren, Aaron, Michael, Kat, Gio, Amanda, Matt in the booth. On behalf of all of us here at the museum, I want to say thanks so much for coming and attending. It's been a pleasure to host and share the story of Christa, her process, her history, her Native American culture, and the way in which she's devised this technique. Again, if you have an opportunity, check out the YouTube channel. This video and this session will live in perpetuity. And by all means, check out Glamazon Glass, Christa's Instagram. She's also available on Facebook as well.